Shalom. I'm Paul Flanzer, Chairman of Temple Adat Shalom's Adult Education Committee. It's April 21st, 2008. Sitting next to me is our speaker, Howard Marcus, who holds multiple degrees in dentistry, an MD degree, as well as an honorary PhD, and you will hear a very fantastic story. His topic is From Kaiser to Hitler to Mussolini and beyond, a survivor story. This gives you a time frame for his 98 years. But what you will find very intriguing is his remarkable life, how he survived as a German Jew in an era of dictators. His wife, Lottie, told me that he was not only a man of excellent judgment, but also very lucky. And the Jewish community, both here and in Israel, is lucky as well, because they've both benefited from his life as his current activities as a benefactor and a philanthropist. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Howard Marcus.
Thank you. Before I start my proper talk, I think it is appropriate to say a few things that have no direct bearing on my talk. And that is that most of you, no doubt, have heard of survivor stories before. Most of you are familiar with some of the things, and I dare say none of you know all of it. And there are certain aspects that are connected with my personal story that will be of benefit to those among you who want to know a little more about those years of the Holocaust. And that is what I'm trying to do. Now, I also want to say, before I get started on my personal stories, that, and this may surprise you, that I never have been inside a concentration camp during the Holocaust years. I visited them afterwards, but I was never in there. So your question is appropriate if you say, well, how do you call yourself a survivor? I consider myself a survivor of many close calls, very close calls, many of them, and a survivor of tremendous obstacles that were in my way before I reached what I call the land where milk and honey flows, the United States of America. There were many, many obstacles in my way, and I let you in with some of them, as much as time allows. There were many obstacles in the way. There were hurdles that were seemed to be impenetrable, and all logic at the time would advise anybody that it's impossible. Now, those incidents I like you to share with me, and with that in mind, let's go to the beginning. The beginning is the day of my birth. The day of my birth was in September of 1909. I won't tell you how old I am, but I'll tell you when I was born. And let's take a look at the world at large during those days before Hitler. The Kaiser was in charge of Germany. Germany was peaceful. Germany was very far advanced in the line of nations. As a matter of fact, it was the country on the horizon of cultural and scientific development. People from all over the world looked to Germany. It was the cultural achievement of all nations. Students from all over the world came to Germany, and postgraduate students came to Germany. And Germany was a very proud nation. As a matter of fact, the German anthem says it all. The German anthem, which the Germans sang with fervor and enthusiasm, was Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, über alles in der Welt. Translated, it means Germany, Germany is above all in the world. Now, the Germans did not only sing their anthem, they believed in it. And we have to admit that great reason to believe in it, because it was considered the top nation. And then the question arises, how could such a nation that was first in culture, in philosophy, in poetry, and music, in medicine, sink so deep as to become a nation of murderers, of convinced offenders against anything that a normal and educated person has. And this is what I'm trying to tell you. Now, I want to make sure that I'm not being misunderstood. If I give you some sort of explanation for the change of the German nation from one of cultural achievers to one of base murderers, I'm not trying to explain, and I'm just giving you a little background, because nothing can explain the horrible things that were committed in Germany. And some of them, as far as they affected myself, I will mention to you later on. So anything, an explanation should not be misunderstood by you as an exculpation. So with that in mind, we are making a jump now, a jump to the time that the Hitler regime came to Germany. The Hitler regime came to Germany in January of 1933. At that time, I was a young assistant to a Jewish dentist in East Germany. My home was in West Germany, but having special qualifications, I was hired to this dentist, who was a very competent dentist in East Germany. And the town where he practiced was named Hindenburg, and I want you to remember that name because I'll come back to that later on. So I got a job as his assistant there. Shortly after Hitler had come to power, that is in April of 1933, Hitler declared his first Judenboycott, the boycott of all Jewish enterprises, whatever they were. On the morning of this fatal day, I proceeded as usually to my office, and as I tried to enter the building to my office, there were two uniformed Nazis. And one of them, they both barred the entry. And one of them said, "Oh, you don't want to go to that Jew." Obviously, he didn't know who I was. He thought I was a patient. And I pushed him aside physically and proceeded without saying anything. I was waiting for patients to come, but none came. And then I realized at that point that my time in Germany was up. I also realized that I was in great physical danger at this point. So I went to my home, packed my suitcase, and proceeded to take a train, the first available train, to West Germany, where my family lived, my parents and my sisters. I arrived there, and the first thing I noticed as I entered the living room, that the living room was very dark. And I knew it was a bright room facing the outside with large windows, and I investigated. And to my surprise, I saw that the family who lived above my parents and who rented from my father their room had put a Nazi flag out that covered our entire living room windows. And obviously, I could not touch the flag. I was fully aware of that. But it made my intentions of leaving Germany even firmer. I was fully convinced at that time, if I wasn't before, that I had to leave. My parents were very much against my leaving, and so were most of the German Jews, because they reasoned the German people are too educated. They are politically too educated to fall for a rabble-rouser, a house painter, uneducated, as is this thing is not going to last. The German people are not going to take it. And at most they say, stay out, here you have a home, don't leave, you don't know where you're going, you don't speak any language and other than German, you have a future here and you have a home here and you have your family here. But I did not fall into the same type of thinking, because my answer to them was, I'll come back when things are better, but I will not live in the indignity that the present Germany provides for anybody who is Jewish. So I prepared everything I could for the exodus. But that was easier said than done, because as you can imagine, for a professional to go to a different country with a different language and different customs is not a very easy solution. But I was intent to leave, and I did my best, but not before there was an election, an official election, the first and only official open election during the Hitler regime in Germany. The election was a simple one. As I came, my parents again did not want me to go. My sisters, who were older than I was, did not go. but I insisted I'm going. But before I went to the election, I packed my suitcase, being fully aware of what might happen if I would go. So I came to the election place. Again, two uniformed Nazis handed out the ballot. One of them gave me the ballot, and on the ballot it simply said, should Germany belong to the League of Nations or not? That's the only vote, yes or no. And as he handed the ballot, I saw there were two election booths where you could go into. And the Nazi said to me as I took the ballot on my way to the booth, you don't have to bother go to the booth, he said. You can fill it out right here. Well, I insisted I wanted to go to the booth. And again, I realized that he knew which way I would vote by insisting to go and make it a secret vote and not an open vote in front of him. So I went to the booth, gave my vote, went home immediately from the election booth, and my suitcase, as I said, was packed, and I had made tentative I wouldn't say agreements, but I had explored the possibility of going to Italy, because Italy was one of the few countries that did not require a lot of visas, a lot of difficulties that I could not fulfill. And with it more, I, as it turned out, wrongfully concluded at that time that Italy had fascism already, and had fascism without anti-Semitism. Mussolini ridiculed at this time Hitler openly in many of his speeches. And I felt that that was a good place to be. The problem was to find a place to work in my profession. But realizing this, I was prepared to work as a street worker. I literally said to myself, whatever work I get, I do. If it's not in my profession, I'll be happier as a street worker in Italy than in Germany. Now, mind you, at that time, the difficulties in Germany with the Nazi regime, as it turned out later, the violent anti-Semitism was not yet fully there. There was anti-Semitism, but it wasn't that wide-spoken, was not that extreme at that time. But I took the first train with my suitcase being packed from the election booth and left my parents and sisters and left my home, and that's the last time I saw them, and I saw my home again. So I left to the first train south, again realizing if I would stay too long, I might not ever make it. So I came to Italy. Italy, of course, was a very serious problem. Apart from the fact that I had to qualify in my profession in order to practice it, there was my personal difficulty with the language. I didn't speak the language. And imagine somebody coming to a foreign country, doesn't speak the language, and trying to practice in my profession. It was impossible. But I found some physician who was a nose and throat man who was willing to take me on, provided I would teach him dentistry, because he was anxious to learn dentistry and include dentistry with his practice. And I was happy to find his place, especially happy because the salary was magnificent, $15 a month, for which I was allowed to sleep in the waiting room couch, on the waiting room couch, and my kitchen was the laboratory. So after I worked with him and taught him, and I found that by sleeping in the waiting room couch, I was never alone. I always had company in form of bedbugs every night. The kitchen, I had a Bunsen burner, that was my stove, and for food I ate bread, which was the cheapest that I could get, and milk. And since I had some medical background by then, I knew that you cannot have a uniform language. You have to change the menu. So one night I had bread with milk and heated it over the Bunsen burner, so I had a warm meal. And the next night I had bread with milk. So this went on for quite some time, and I found the Italians very warm, very cordial, and very understanding, except they could not understand that a normal person like me had to leave a country without having done anything, really. They just couldn't understand it. Apart from that, I give you a few examples now instead of talking about it, some examples as they happened to me, which shows that the complete absence of understanding of the Italian people, of the politics involved, and even as the basic fact of what a Jew is involved. So when I looked for a furnished room, the landlady asked me the question that I've been asked ever since, again and again and again. He says, "Where did you come from?" And I said, "From Germany." He said, "From Germany?" He said, "Why did you leave Germany?" And I told them I left because I'm a Jew. And they said, what has that to do with it? That they did not understand it. He said, "Oh, you are a Jew." The landlady of my prospective new quarters said, "You like this room?" I said, "Why do I like this room? Because I'm a Jew." "Because," he said, "when you look out the window, you look at the Jewish church." I said, "The Jewish church? Where is it?" He said, "Right there in front of us." I said, "Where? Don't you see the one with the cross on top?" Well, I was anxious to find out what the Jewish church in Italy looks like. And when I went down to inquire, I realized that it was a Protestant church. And I realized that anything that wasn't Catholic to them was Jewish. Now, to give you another example, one of my patients was the commander of the local military fort in Naples, where my practice was. And he was a very friendly, very personal guy, and he obviously wanted to make friends with me, socially too, and he invited me again and again, come to the fort, I want to have you for lunch with me. And finally, he said, now I have invited you so many times, why don't you accept? And I said to him, I don't want you to get into trouble. He said, me? You? Me? Into trouble? How can you get me into trouble? I'm the commander. I'm the boss. You can't get me into trouble. I would love to have you. Yes, I said, but you do not know that I am a Jew. He said, you are a Jew? And I said, yes, I am a Jew. With that, he got out of his chair, took me into his arm, kissed me on both cheeks, and said, me too. So I said, you too? He said, yes, every Sunday I have a fight with my wife. She wants me to go to confession, and just like you, I don't go to confession because I'm a Jew like you. I guess I don't have to explain his reasoning. Because he was not a religious, observant Catholic, he referred to himself as a Jew. So those are just some of the observations. I have others, but I'll leave them for later because I want you to have something more humorous to get in the second part, if we get that far. So here I was working very hard, as you can understand. I learned the language because I had nobody to talk to. I had to speak the language. I had to speak to my patients, and I had to go and buy myself milk and had to talk. So I learned to speak Italian very, very well, very soon. And I was happy. But the strain of my existence at that time, having several jobs and to fulfill, and very poor nutrition, took its toll. So I got seriously ill while working at the chair with a patient, and I had to give up my practice. I was given the choice, either go to the unappetizing Ospedale degli Incurabili, translated hospital for those who cannot be cured, because I had incurable, at that time, incurable disease, and I had to stop practicing. So I left and went to northern Italy, checked into a sanatorium, and miraculously, I might say, after a relatively short time, I recouped sufficiently that I could go back to Naples, where I had practiced before. However, I had to start all over again because I don't want to go into too many details, but I couldn't go back to my old position because when I fell ill, who was then my partner in the meantime, I still did not get much more than $15 a month because I never saw any books. He handled the books and he handed out what he felt like, which was, and he warned me before, even if you are my partner, I make you my partner, but you won't get much more than the $15 a month. And I didn't think it was possible, but I was too naive to know better, to put it that way. So I was his partner, but when I had to leave, I discovered that anything that was over $15 he put into gold or other items that he kept in his safe. I didn't have the key to the safe, I didn't see it. So obviously when I tried to get my share, he refused. So I couldn't go back. So here I was coming back to the same place and had to look again for a new position. I found one dentist whose father was a dentist. He was a dentist and his three brothers were dentists. So they're all dentists in the family. And he was a professor of dentistry at the University of Naples, a very personal fellow who convinced me that I would be even with all of them, I would be one of them, and whatever profits there I would share with them. And he persuaded me to come. Reluctantly, I accepted it because it was my only chance, really, to be fair about that. And I was a partner in his office. He also persuaded me to be in his office because at that time, once I came back, it was more difficult for me to work again because now I had an enemy in Naples, the former partner who was not looking very favorably of me establishing an office a block from his office. So I was fully aware of that. But this professor persuaded me I would be safe in his place because he would give me a nurse who would screen every patient who would come to his office. He said she was over 60 years old, and he knew everybody in the city of Naples, he said, and none is going to come and do you harm because she would screen everyone and not let them in. So with that in mind, I felt reassured and I felt relatively happy, but obviously very insecure all along. But then I recall came a day very shortly after it started where the nurse came to me and said, the chief of police. When she said the chief of police, the first thing I did, I aimed for the window. The practice was on the third floor, but I felt it's time to get out of the way. And while I was opening the window, she grabbed me and said, "You don't understand. He comes as a patient." So she pulled me back, and when I got my composture, and the chief of police came in, the first thing he said, "I heard a lot about you," and I didn't like to hear that because I didn't know what he meant, but that was the opening gesture. "And here's my card, my personal number. I'm going to protect you. Any problem that you have, you call me. This is my private number, and you'll be protected. Nothing is going to happen to you." Well, I felt pretty reassured with that. But then the time came when Hitler and Mussolini made their pact, the famous Hitler-Mussolini pact. And that was a great disaster for me, because at that point I realized my stay in Italy was no longer safe. And everybody, I heard the same things that I heard in Germany: nothing is going to happen to you, don't leave. The Italians said to me, you are one of us, we love you, and you are safe, don't leave, don't go. But I had learned my lesson in Germany, and I didn't listen to them, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. So Hitler and Mussolini made the pact. And Hitler ordered Mussolini to line up all the Jews. So I tried to get out of Italy now, which was a tornado in my life, because here for several times that I'd built up a practice and started to get a foundation, I had to leave again. So I tried to get out of Italy this time. Out of Italy was easier said than done, because the headlines at that time were International Conference and Evian-les-Bains of 32 countries. You probably have never heard of this place, but there was an international conference in 1938, where Western countries, including the United States, 32 altogether, decided that unfortunately they couldn't do anything to make the life of the refugees easier. They refused entry, 32 countries except one. The one that opened their country was the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is the only country of those 32 countries in 1938 that opened their country to agricultural workers. Now, you can imagine that the German refugees, they hardly knew what a cow looked like, because they were so off the country, because for 2,000 years they were not allowed to own country, to possess country. They were in all other professions, but the last one was the agricultural business. But nevertheless, quite a number of people accepted, and they went to the Dominican Republic. My understanding is there's still some of them left there. But I also heard a story that when the people, the German refugees, who accepted to go to the Dominican Republic, they had not the faintest idea of country life, and I'm told that the young women who came with handbags and high heels, they questioned each other, how do you milk a cow? Do you pump the tail and get the milk out, or what do you do? They had not the slightest idea of life in the country. So it was one gesture, but I repeat what I said, all the other Western states, any one of them, including the United States, refused to take any more. As a matter of fact, the United States at that time had a closed border for German Jews. There was a law, a quota system, and the quota was filled immediately, apart from all the other restrictions that you had to overcome to get to the United States, but visa, and affidavit, and so on and so forth, you also had to fall within the quota. Well, with that atmosphere and that environment surrounding me, you can get a fair idea, not a good idea, but a fair idea how it felt to get out of Italy.
Could I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, would you like some water?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask you, didn't you receive a medical degree in Italy?
Yes, I skipped all that.
Yeah, why don't you tell them about the education you got there?
Okay, there's some interesting things here. Yeah, well, I realized very soon that without qualifying professionally, my life in Italy was not very prosperous in the future, that I would be condemned to $15 a month if I would not do something about it. So thank you for reminding me, but I tried to skip things to make it a little easier, lots of other things. So anyway, but how could I do it? Well, I had a degree, a dental degree in Germany, but the Italians didn't recognize it. Even though the German dentistry was far superior to anything that they had to offer in Italy. Far superior, but you had to be a specialist. You had to be a specialist in medicine. First, you became a general medical doctor, and then you could become a specialist in dentistry, in eye, in ear, nose, and throat, and anything else. So I was told I had to go to medical school in Italy. Well, this being my only chance, I went to medical school. So in addition to all the other problems I had to study, but I didn't have much time to study, so I usually found myself with an open book, sitting in a chair early in the morning, and had fallen asleep during the night, and that was then I had to work on patients. So it was a very, very strenuous position that showed itself, since you brought it up, otherwise I wouldn't have gone that far. I might as well mention at this point. And again, tornado hit my subsistence. I fell ill with another incurable disease. An incurable disease at that time that not only did not allow me to practice, but my landlady refused to come and enter my room, because typhoid fever was a deadly disease in those days, no treatment available, and she, and I do not say this to condemn her or blame her, and she was not going to take a chance, so she did not come. But I became weaker, I couldn't get out of bed on my own, and then another miracle happened. Somebody knocked on the door, and there were two elderly spinsters, very Catholic, very religious, who were my patients and heard that I was sick. They found out where my room was, and from there on they came twice a day to help me out of bed, to give me some food, twice a day, water, etc., and they actually, again, saved my life. So I overcame that one. Now, I'm thinking how much I can talk about Italy, but there are a few things that I think, talking about my time at the university, when it came to the time that I was ready for examinations in medicine now. Examinations in Italy are open. They're not written. They're oral and open. That is, students come and listen because they want to learn what kind of questions are being asked. So they're an open area. And each time I registered my name, wherever it was, the professor, before he examined me, would ask, where do you come from? Well, naturally, my answer was always the same as it had to be, from Germany. So one professor stopped the examination proper and addressed the audience of hundreds of students. Said, gentlemen, did you hear this young man? At that time I was still a young man. This young man comes from Germany. Do you realize what the Duce, Mussolini, has done for us? In my time, we had to go to Germany to study. Now the Germans come here. There's great applause, no more questions asked. So that's one incident.